The conference room was packed. 30 people sat around the mahogany table. Clients, team members, executives. I had spent 3 weeks preparing this presentation. Every slide was perfect. Every data point was accurate. I had color-coded the charts, verified every statistic, and rehearsed the delivery until I could do it in my sleep. Clicked the first slide. Then I watched Richard lean over and smirk. "Clearly, you're not cut out for this project," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Before I could respond, before I could even breathe, he reached over and deleted the file from the shared drive. Not minimized. Deleted. Every visual, every chart, every hour of work vanished in 5 seconds. Gasps echoed around the table. My colleagues stared at me. I saw pity in their eyes. Confusion. Some looked away, uncomfortable. One client cleared his throat. Richard stood up, brushed off his suit jacket, and smiled like he had just saved everyone from a disaster. Froze. My voice stuck in my throat. My hands trembled. I felt my credibility evaporating in real time, dissolving like smoke in front of everyone who mattered. Inside, rage burned like a furnace. But I held it down. I swallowed it. I smiled weakly and excused myself. He thought he had won. He had no idea what was coming. I left the room, pretending composure, but my heart was already racing. My notebook was already open. Every moment, every action, every word. He would regret underestimating me. I returned to my office and closed the door. I pressed my palms to my face and breathed. Humiliation, disbelief, fury. All of it crashed into my chest at once. I needed clarity. I needed facts. I pulled up every email thread, every meeting note, every project update I had saved. I compared them to what Richard claimed in his reports. What Richard presented to leadership. What Richard took credit for. Patterns emerged. Clear. Undeniable. Patterns. Richard had a history of this. He subtly rewrote my ideas in reports. He presented them as his own. He mentioned my name in passing and then highlighted his leadership and vision. I found email chains where I had proposed strategies weeks before he claimed them. I found meeting notes with my name listed as the contributor, but his signature on the final proposal. Felt my pulse calm. The fire inside became methodical, cold, strategic. I opened a private document on my personal laptop. I started cataloging every offense, every lie, every stolen opportunity. Witnesses, concrete proof, screenshots, email headers with timestamps. Everything documented in chronological order. This wasn't rage anymore. This was preparation. An email popped up while I was working. From a client. "Thank you for the brilliant strategy you developed, Richard. Your vision really impressed us." My vision. Not his. The client had mistakenly sent the email to me first, then forwarded it to Richard. I could see the timestamp. I could see the truth. The evidence was already forming. The trap was already building itself. I saved that email. Then I smiled for the first time since leaving the conference room. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed corroboration. Witnesses. People who had seen Richard's behavior firsthand. Over the next week, I reached out to colleagues quietly, carefully. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I just asked questions that seemed casual. "Did you see the last meeting?" I asked Jacob, a senior analyst. His hesitation told me everything. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Why?" "I was just curious about the timeline on that project proposal. Do you remember who proposed the X strategy?" Jacob shifted uncomfortably. "I think you did. But Richard presented it." "Interesting. Do you remember when?" He nodded. Small confirmations. That's all I needed. I reached out to Nora, a junior designer. I was cleaning out my files and found some early concept sketches. "Do you remember working with me on the Morrison campaign?" "Of course," she said. "I designed those layouts based on your direction." "Right. And do you remember what happened when we presented them?" She looked away. "Richard. He told the client he designed them. But he just added the final touches. The core idea was yours. Fear had kept her silent before. But small acknowledgments now strengthened my resolve. Each conversation was carefully noted. Body language. Choice of words. Exact quotes. I documented every micro detail that could later corroborate my claims. I stayed composed through every conversation. Smiled. I never revealed my full intentions. But inside I was building a network of witnesses. People who knew the truth. People who were tired of Richard's behavior. One colleague, flustered and nervous, mentioned something that made my pulse surge. "There was a meeting last month," he said quietly, "where Richard completely took credit for your work. The whole presentation. Do you remember the date?" "It was recorded," he said. "The client insisted on recording all strategy sessions. I think it's still on the shared server." Froze. A recorded meeting. With Richard's voice claiming my ideas. With timestamps. With undeniable proof. This could be the first piece of irrefutable evidence. I requested the recording from IT the next morning. I framed it professionally. "I'm reviewing past strategy sessions to update my project documentation for compliance." They sent me the file within an hour. My heart pounded as I pressed play. I listened to Richard speak. I heard him claim ideas that were indisputably mine. I heard him explain concepts I had developed. I heard him use my exact phrasing. Paused. Rewound. Listened again. Every word was documented. Every stolen credit was captured. Every lie was preserved in digital format. I captured screenshots with timestamps. I extracted the audio segments where he made specific claims. I created a detailed log matching each statement to the emails I had saved. Emails that proved I had proposed these ideas first. The scale of his arrogance became clear to me in that moment. He had completely underestimated the power of records, the power of documentation, the power of truth preserved in time. That same evening, I backed up the evidence securely. Multiple locations, encrypted folders, cloud storage. If anything happened to my computer, the evidence would survive. While cataloging the files, I noticed something else. An anomaly in an email chain. One that didn't quite fit. I dug deeper. A month earlier, Richard had submitted financial figures to a client that didn't match our actual project costs. The numbers were inflated. Significantly. I found the original cost sheet in my files. I found Richard's version in an email to the client. The discrepancy was approximately $200,000. A bigger scandal. Waiting to explode. I began crafting my plan with precision. This wasn't about confrontation. This was about timing. This was about patience. My mind worked like a chessboard, plotting moves several steps ahead. Richard thrived on chaos. He fed on confrontation. He used aggression to intimidate people into silence. I thrived on patience. I decided I wouldn't confront him. I wouldn't argue with him. I wouldn't give him the opportunity to intimidate me or gaslight me. Instead, I would let the evidence speak. I would present facts. I would build a case so solid that no one could dispute it. I continued my interactions with him normally. Professional. Polite. I masked my awareness while subtly collecting more corroborations from colleagues and documents. Every casual question became part of the strategy. "Did you keep notes on that client meeting?" Every polite request became calculated. "Could you send me the original proposal timeline?" I was playing chess. He didn't even know the game had started. One afternoon, Richard emailed me a project summary he intended to present to leadership the next day. It was thorough, professional, and completely filled with my work presented as his. I read through it carefully. Then I created a detailed annotation document. I marked every section, every idea, every data point. I linked each one back to emails I had sent weeks or months earlier. I created a timeline that was impossible to dispute. The document was a roadmap of his deception. He saved it, secured it, and waited. I introduced a small, controlled error into a report I knew Richard would present. Nothing major. Nothing that would cause real damage. Just a minor statistical inconsistency that someone actually paying attention would catch. I watched him present it as flawless. His confidence was breathtaking. He didn't even review the document carefully. He just assumed it was correct because I had prepared it. He spoke with such certainty about the accuracy of the data. Colleagues whispered. I noticed subtle eye rolls when he misrepresented my contributions. When he took credit for the analysis, I watched people exchange glances. The small test confirmed something crucial. My evidence would stand on its own, independent of my voice, independent of my credibility in that moment. The facts spoke louder than any argument I could make. Client sent a direct email to me that same afternoon. Compliment. Specific praise for the analysis I had contributed to the project. Your insights on the market segmentation were exactly what we needed, the client wrote. Richard wasn't copied on that email. The validation was small. But the seeds of Richard's unraveling were already growing. People were noticing. People were paying attention. And now they had evidence, in their own observations, that something wasn't adding up with Richard's claims. I continued building my case with obsessive precision, adding a pattern of repeated offenses to my evidence folder. Each misrepresentation, every stolen idea, every belittling comment, logged with date, time, witnesses, and supporting documentation. My patience became invisible tension in the office. Richard didn't notice. He never looked deep enough to see the storm gathering beneath my calm exterior. He was too busy being Richard. I overheard him bragging to another manager one afternoon. They were standing near the coffee station, and I was in the adjacent hallway. His voice was loud, arrogant. That major client project. That was all me, he said. I developed the entire strategy. My team executed it, but the vision was mine. The leadership was mine. I stood still. My hand gripped my coffee cup, and I listened. Every word was a lie I could now back up with months of proof. Recordings, emails, witness testimony, timestamps. The careless words of an arrogant man, preserved in my memory, ready to be used. A junior employee named Jordan came to me one afternoon. They looked nervous, intimidated. I need to talk to you, Jordan said quietly. About Richard. We sat in a private conference room. Jordan was afraid, could see it, but they also wanted to tell the truth. He's been manipulating me, Jordan said, asking me to take credit for things I didn't do, or asking me to say I didn't do things that I actually did. He's trying to make himself look better and other people look worse. I listened carefully, asked gentle questions. I didn't lead Jordan, I just let them talk. And as they talked, their recollection aligned perfectly with my timeline, with my evidence. Would you be willing to document what you just told me? Asked. Jordan hesitated. Will it get me in trouble? No, I said. This is about accuracy, about truth, and about making sure people know who actually did the work. Jordan agreed. I helped them write a detailed account of the incidents. No accusations, just facts. What happened? Who said what? Their testimony, paired with emails and recordings, could corroborate my timeline perfectly. The puzzle pieces were aligning. But I didn't rush. I didn't expose anything yet. I just collected. I documented. Waited. Richard scheduled a surprise leadership review. He had no idea that the evidence I had collected could be used immediately to expose him. But I wasn't ready yet. My plan needed one more element. The leadership review happened on a Tuesday morning. Richard presented his version of events with complete confidence. I watched him carefully. I noticed the subtle hesitations from colleagues, the micro-expressions betraying disbelief. Some of them had already confirmed information with me. They knew what was true, and they knew Richard was lying. I remained quiet, observing, calculating, letting him talk. He presented 3 major projects as his achievements. He outlined his leadership vision. He praised his strategic thinking. Every single claim was documented in my files as work I had initiated, developed, or completed. A crucial error happened mid-presentation. Richard claimed he had proposed a specific strategy 6 months ago. I had that email saved. I was there when I proposed it. 3 people in that room had been present for the original brainstorm. He got the date wrong. He said 6 months. It was actually 8 months. And in those 6 months he was claiming credit for, I had already presented this strategy to the client. The timeline didn't add up. One executive noticed. I saw him make a note. I saw him exchange a glance with another leader. Richard didn't notice. He kept talking. I sent leadership an email that afternoon. Professional. Factual. I wanted to clarify some details from this morning's presentation for accuracy and compliance purposes. I wrote. I've prepared a summary of documented discrepancies in the timeline and project attributions that I believe would be helpful for the record. No accusations. No emotional language. Just observations. For accuracy. For compliance. I attached my annotated document. The one with all the evidence linked and cross-referenced. Emails. Meeting notes. Recordings. Timelines. I was explicit but professional. Project A was proposed by me in this email, attached, dated X. The same strategy was presented to the client by Richard on this date, documented in this meeting note. The original concepts and data analysis were developed during this period, as evidenced by the attached email chain. Documentation. Nothing that could be disputed. Leadership requested a follow-up meeting to review the evidence directly. They didn't know I had already organized it comprehensively, perfectly, like a lawyer preparing for trial. I was ready. Richard continued to flaunt his credit-taking, completely unaware that his email trails were being pieced together into an irrefutable narrative. I quietly forwarded critical messages to HR and compliance with annotations. Not accusations. Just highlighted patterns. Clear evidence of deception. Note the date of this email, mine, proposing the strategy. Compare to this presentation. His, claiming the same strategy. This email chain shows the development process, with my contributions documented. This later report lists Richard as the sole developer. This client email references my original analysis. This Richard email to the same client presents identical analysis as his own work. I was building a wall of evidence so solid that no one could argue with it. HR responded within 48 hours. An urgent meeting request. We've reviewed the documentation you sent, the HR director wrote. We'd like to meet with you to discuss your concerns and review the evidence in detail. The exposure was starting. Not because I had accused him, but because the evidence itself told the story. Richard began sensing tension in the office. Not knowing where it came from. Just knowing something was wrong. Small glares from colleagues. Subtle avoidance. Minor challenges to his statements in meetings. He became anxious. Defensive. I watched him change. The arrogance started to crack. Just slightly. But it was there. He called me into his office one afternoon. People are questioning my work, he said. Not a question. An accusation. He stayed calm. I'm not sure what you mean. You know exactly what I mean, he said. His voice was lower now. Less confident. Someone's been spreading rumors about me taking credit for your work. I looked at him directly. I haven't spread anything. I've simply documented facts and provided them to HR and leadership for accuracy purposes. If that feels like an accusation, maybe that's something to examine. His face flushed. He opened his mouth to respond. Continued. The evidence speaks for itself, Richard. Emails, recordings, timelines. If you want to discuss any of it, HR is the right place to do that. I stood up to leave. Wait, he said. His voice was different now. Threatening. You're going to regret this. You're going to regret questioning my authority. I turned back to face him. My heart was pounding but my face was calm. I'm not questioning your authority. I'm presenting documented facts. That's very different. I left his office and closed the door quietly behind me. My notebook, filled with proof, was untouched on my desk. He didn't suspect it existed. But I knew what I had done. And I knew what was coming. That confrontation was the turning point. Richard was rattled. And a rattled person makes mistakes. He tried to regain control by going to HR himself. Preemptively, he claimed I was incompetent, disloyal, that I was spreading lies about him out of jealousy because I wasn't promoted. But my prepared evidence preempted every single claim he made. When HR asked me about his accusations, I simply handed them my documentation. Organized, professional, complete. I haven't made any accusations, I said calmly. I've simply provided HR with documented facts, emails, recordings from company meetings, witness statements, timelines. Everything is here. HR requested copies of both his records and my records for review. They wanted everything. Every email, every project file, every meeting note. They were setting him up for exposure, even if they didn't fully realize it yet. Colleagues quietly confirmed their willingness to support my claims when the time came. Not in dramatic conversations, just in careful moments, subtle nods, contact, careful words. Nora pulled me aside in the hallway. I'm ready to back you up, she said quietly. If they ask me about the Morrison campaign, I'm telling the truth. Jacob sent me an email with a list of projects where he had witnessed Richard taking credit for other people's work. Just wanted to document this for my own records, the email said. But we both knew why he was really sending it. Jordan was prepared to give a formal statement to HR about the manipulation they had witnessed. Their subtle confirmations strengthened my confidence. I wasn't alone in this. The truth had witnesses. The truth had evidence. A key witness, someone I hadn't expected to help, admitted they had recordings of Richard misrepresenting multiple projects in client calls. They were worried about what it meant for their own credibility. The client heard him claim my work was his, this person told me. I need this to be clear. One more piece. One more recording. One more wall of evidence. Richard attempted to manipulate the situation further by going around HR directly to a senior vice president. He presented a distorted version of events, claiming I was a disgruntled employee trying to sabotage him. But HR had already reviewed my evidence. They had already spoken with witnesses. They had already listened to the recordings. The VP called HR and asked directly, "What's actually going on here?" HR showed the VP my documentation. The VP then requested both Richard's and my records be reviewed formally. Not an informal investigation. Formal one. The game had escalated. And Richard was losing. The office became a pressure cooker. Everyone sensed something major was happening. The tension was visible. Richard grew paranoid. Making mistakes in his work. Over-explaining simple decisions. Contradicting himself in meetings. Every micro-error was logged by people around him. Every inconsistency was noted. Every contradiction was documented. He scheduled a private meeting with leadership, unaware that I had already arranged for my own documentation to be reviewed at the same time. The leadership team was seeing both sides now. But they were seeing my side with evidence. Overwhelming evidence. The formal review happened over the course of 2 weeks. I presented my evidence in a controlled, professional manner. Not emotional. Not angry. Just facts. Emails. Recordings. Witness statements. Timelines. Project documentation. Client feedback. Everything organized. Everything verified. The narrative was irrefutable. Richard attempted to deflect. He claimed the recordings were out of context. He said the emails were misinterpreted. He argued that collaborative work was always complicated. But then he made a mistake. In his arrogance, he revealed inconsistencies I had been waiting for. He contradicted something he had said earlier. He made a claim about a date that didn't match the documentation. Leadership caught it. I saw them exchange glances. They had found the crack in his story. Colleagues began voicing subtle confirmations during meetings. Not accusations, just truth. When Richard claimed credit for something, someone would casually mention, "Actually, I remember when you first proposed that idea." Not confrontational, just factual. Richard became defensive, flustered. His control slipped. Cracks appeared in his demeanor. A critical client called the office directly. They wanted to clarify something about the project attribution. "We want to make sure we're giving credit where it's due," the client said to leadership. They corroborated my contributions. They undermined Richard's claims publicly, without even realizing they were doing it. They were just telling the truth about who did the work. I stayed calm through all of it, watching him unravel silently. No shouting, no emotional outburst, no dramatic confrontations, just the weight of truth. His colleagues noticed the change in him. HR noticed. Leadership noticed. Richard attempted a last-minute maneuver to regain control. He tried to shift blame. He tried to reframe the narrative. But my documentation blocked every escape route, every excuse, every alternative explanation. The evidence was too solid. The timeline was too clear. The witnesses were too consistent. There was nowhere left to hide. Richard tried to pin blame on minor mistakes on me, claiming incompetence, claiming I had made errors that he was forced to correct. But the timeline disproved every single claim. I had documentation showing the errors were actually his corrections to my accurate work. I had email trails showing the sequence of events. I had witness statements confirming what actually happened. The story he was trying to tell fell apart immediately. HR scheduled a formal investigation, signaling the beginning of his downfall. Not a review, an investigation. In desperation, Richard attempted to manipulate a new colleague into lying on his behalf. He approached them privately and suggested they corroborate a false version of events. The colleague hesitated. They came to me later that day. "He asked me to tell HR that I remember things differently than I actually do," they told me. "He wants me to support his version of the timeline." I documented this conversation carefully. Not in a way that would get the colleague in trouble, but in a way that showed Richard's pattern of manipulation escalating. This additional evidence could accelerate his exposure. It showed he wasn't just dishonest about work. He was willing to pressure others into lying for him. The investigation was moving forward. Richard grew visibly anxious. He made mistakes in interviews with HR. He contradicted statements he had made earlier. He over-explained things that didn't need explanation. In an informal conversation with a witness I had carefully prepared, Richard accidentally admitted to taking credit for multiple high-profile projects. He said it casually like it was nothing. But the witness was listening. And they remembered. The admission was logged, documented, preserved. HR compiled all the evidence and confronted Richard formally. They went through each allegation, each piece of evidence, each contradiction. His arrogance crumbled as each accusation was verified, as each claim was disproven, as each lie was exposed by documentation. He realized, too late, that silence and patience had trapped him completely. There was no escape, no way to talk his way out, no way to manipulate the facts. The evidence was undeniable. Leadership formally acknowledged my contributions in meetings and official communications. Moving forward, project attributions will be assigned based on documented involvement, they announced. We've reviewed historical projects and are correcting the record. Colleagues began openly supporting me, not just quietly, openly. Richard's credibility evaporated, not because anyone was spreading rumors, because the facts contradicted every claim he had ever made. He attempted one last apology, a desperate gesture to salvage his reputation, but it fell flat. It rang hollow, because it came against undeniable facts, against evidence, against truth. An apology without accountability means nothing. The outcome was decisive. Richard was reassigned to a different department, stripped of his authority, removed from leadership. His reputation within the company was destroyed, not by rumors or gossip, but by documented facts. My reputation, voice, and career were restored. Not just restored, strengthened. Leadership trusted me now. Not just because I had been right, but because I had handled it with intelligence, composure, and evidence. I watched Richard leave his office for the last time, carrying a box of personal items. Looking diminished, I felt no satisfaction in his pain. But I felt profound peace in the truth. Patience had won. Evidence had won. Timing had won. I had reclaimed not just my career, not just my voice. I had reclaimed my peace. The office buzzed with quiet respect for my intelligence and composure, for my refusal to stoop to his level, for my choice to let the facts speak. 3 months later, I received a promotion. Not because of what happened with Richard, but because leadership had finally seen my actual contributions, my real value, my capability. I was assigned to lead a major new initiative, the exact type of project Richard always fought to control. The irony wasn't lost on me. Nora, Jordan, and Jacob were all assigned to my team. We worked together with transparency and mutual respect. Real collaboration. Real credit where credit was due. The company revised its policies on project attribution and credit accountability. My documentation had highlighted a systemic problem. Now there were checks and balances to prevent it from happening again. I sat at my desk the next morning and finally smiled. Quiet, victorious, unshakable. The betrayal had been real. The humiliation had been real. But so was the vindication. And that was everything. 6 months after Richard left, I received an email from someone I didn't expect to hear from, a former employee who had quit because of Richard's behavior. I saw what happened to Richard, they wrote. And I want to thank you. You did what I couldn't do. You stood up to him with evidence instead of emotion. I'm considering coming back to the company because I believe leadership is taking accountability seriously now. That email meant more to me than any promotion ever could. I realized something profound during this entire journey. My victory wasn't just about Richard. It was about changing the system that allowed people like Richard to thrive in the first place. Leadership invited me to help develop a mentorship program focused on ethical workplace behavior and proper credit attribution. Accepted immediately. Nora became my co-lead on the program. We created training materials, workshops, and accountability systems. We taught people that documentation wasn't vindictive, it was protective. We showed that integrity wasn't weakness, it was strength. Within a year, the company's internal culture surveys showed significant improvement. People felt safer reporting issues. Credit was being attributed accurately. The toxic environment that Richard had created was being systematically dismantled. I had won more than a battle. I had contributed to building a better workplace. Not just for me but for everyone who came after. But beyond the workplace victories, something else happened to me. It had changed. I was no longer the person who froze in that conference room. I was no longer afraid of powerful voices or intimidating authority. I understood the power of my own mind, the strength of patience, the unbreakable force of truth. I started sharing my story with other professionals. Women who had been undermined. People who had been gaslit. Employees who didn't know how to document abuse or stand up for themselves. Don't fight with emotion, I told them. Fight with facts. Build your evidence. Gather your witnesses. They come. Let the truth do the work. Some of them looked skeptical. Some of them were afraid. But I could see the hope in their eyes. Richard's downfall had taught me something invaluable. The most powerful revenge isn't loud or visible. It's quiet. It's documented. It's undeniable. I had reclaimed my voice. But more importantly, I had helped others find theirs. That was the real victory. That was the real peace.